Welcome everyone back to Every Doctor Who Ever. Today we're talking about Season 6 of Classic Doctor Who. We are on the final season of the Second Doctor, and unlike last time, I'll be talking about the general overview of the Second Doctor towards the end of this video, right? We'll be talking about the entirety of the last storylines leading into the regeneration of the Second Doctor, into the third, and the circumstances around it. This season, we still have the producer as Peter Bryant to ultimately the Space Pirates, with Derek Sherwin taking up only as sort of the helper into transition into the next era of Doctor Who. The main script editor is, of course, Derek Sherwin, at least until the ending, mostly for the first two storylines, and later with the Space Pirates, mostly to help out the main script editor of the season, Terrence Dix, who was busy with the two other stories in between. Terrence Dix will, of course, be a very important figure for Doctor Who throughout the classic period going forward, so just note that. Where we last left off, we, of course, had picked up Zoe, as she had been taken from the Wheel in Space, now teaming up with the Second Doctor and Jamie. Jamie is still here, probably the longest-lasting companion of the Classic Who era, at least for the first 6 seasons, obviously, and I'm glad. I still really enjoy Jamie, and I really love this trio. I'll note that by rewatching this, I realized that Season 6 actively isn't as good as I remembered it, but it is still a good season, so it'll be very fun to get into the re-experiencing of this season. We begin with The Dominators. The Dominators, written by Norman Ashby, who I can't really find anything else on, so, there you go. Directed by Maurice Barry, who had previously directed The Moonbase and Tomb of the Cybermen. The Dominators is known from a lot of fans as not one of the good ones. Now, personally, I didn't think it was too bad. I found it kind of as good as like a B-grade sci-fi story, but that's what The Dominators is, certainly. It is of no way any close to the quality of certain other storylines, and it certainly was attempted to be. It's not like they decided to, just like make it purposefully a B-grade sci-fi type feel. That would be a strange idea, wouldn't it? The Dominators, I don't think is good, but I don't think it's horrible. It's actually kind of fun. If you go into it wanting a good sci-fi story, you're not going to get that. But if you go into it knowing it's stupid, you're going to have a great time. The Dominators are essentially like, evil dudes in space. They take over planets, and they sort of like mine them until they blow up, and that's sort of their whole plan the whole time. It takes a whole chunk of the storyline for them to finally find out why the fuck they're mining in this random planet, like off in God knows where space, but that certainly is what they're trying to do. The Dominator spacecraft lands on the planet of Dulcus, which they sort of just like land on this pretty barren part of the world, this island that had been left alone for such an incredibly long time, and just happened to be being researched by a research group who wanted to learn what exactly radiation did. Dulcians are a group of people who are, they are past the point of war, and they are well past weapons, and they want to learn the exact effects of what radiation did in the times past. More than likely, they're like post-apocalyptic, post-Fallout type species, and that's a lot more interesting of an idea of learning about that kind of species than what actually happens, because in reality, they're just kind of British people in a room trying to figure out this whole thing. They get in the middle of it, and a whole team is absolutely obliterated by the Dominators' little robots, known as the Quarks. The Quarks are, of course, our chumblies of this season, because look at those goofy little guys. They're funny, and they got like funny high-pitched voices. They are adorable. How am I supposed to be scared of these robot monsters when they're fucking adorable? There is a reason why the Dominators hadn't showed up for like a good number of years, but I would totally love to see the Quarks again. Ultimately, the Doctor and friends meet up with one of the research groups who are supposed to be there, and soon come face to face with the Quarks. The group is separated. Zoe is brought to the capital. The group who are in charge of the Dulcian don't want to listen ever, basically, because, why wouldn't they? And as Zoe is on her way back, the Doctor and Jamie start exploring and are soon enough kidnapped by the Dominators and the Quarks. They're actually let go after they're just like, there's smart people on the planet. And the Dominators decide, smart people, that's the kind of people we want to subjugate, I guess. Now, them being docile, I get it, right? That could be something you want to take advantage of, but it's specifically because they're smart, and that will help them somehow do slave labor, and it's not like they want to have them like help build their machines, of which they begin setting up all over the place, which look like big light bulbs, which are supposedly drills or something. But no, they just want them as slaves, and it's just to like help them mine this area, which they only really ever move rocks. So it's like, what's their plan here? The Dominators plan the entire storyline. It makes absolutely no sense because they're like, what are you doing? What is the plot here? And there's only really two of them, and they always constantly argue. It's like one wants to actually do the job, and the other one wants to use the quarks to kill everybody for no reason. And you think there's gonna be like a turn somewhere, like one's gonna turn on the other, but like no, that never happens. They just argue all the time. Zoe and the rest of the group are captured, so the Doctor and Jamie go and save them. The Doctor gets kidnapped with the group, because sure, and Jamie, alongside one of the guys who escapes from the group, begin just shooting at the quarks. After they annoy the Dominators enough, the Dominators decide to kind of just leave, with the Doctor being like, don't worry, I rigged their ship to explode. We stopped the weird little drilling things to not make the planet explode, and one part of the island's gonna have a little volcanic explosion. Of which there's a funny ending of Jamie going, you mean this island? And the Doctor's like, uh-oh, and that's when they leave. Some side notes, this is the Doctor using his sonic screwdriver once more. He will use it a couple times throughout this season, and it's fun to see it, because, you know, eventually it'll be the, like, main thing that he uses forever, so to see him slowly uncover the fact that it can be used as a laser is kind of fun. The Dominators is not a good story. It is a wacky, dumb little story, and I must say, I enjoyed it. I certainly would not rank it very high in my Doctor Who ranking, I will tell you that, but I'll note that, you know, it's fun. It's fun if you want wacky, like, late 60s sci-fi schlock, and that's what I could really give the Dominators. The Quarks are funny little robot guys, and the Dominators are so increasingly generic that they are hilarious. This is one that nothing really important necessarily happens, but besides the fact that it is funny, I would say it is one that you can skip. This is certainly not one of those like recommended episodes that you like absolutely need to watch. It's nothing. Now, I might note the fact that Norman Ashby doesn't really have anything with him. That's because he doesn't exist. Norman Ashby was a pseudonym used by Mervyn Heisman and Henry Lincoln, who you may know from creating The Yeti. For the story of the Dominators, they felt unfairly treated by the production team and requested their names be removed from the credits, though early versions of the scripts did have their names, which is why we know the fact that it's actually them. The pseudonym oddly comes from the names of both writers' fathers-in-law, which is a funny little thing that they decided to create. There's a reason why the Dominators, among certain other things, actively weren't used by Doctor Who for a while. For the same reason why the Daleks weren't, oddly enough, because when the writer has made a thing for Doctor Who, let's say lock that shit down, the writers actually owned the rights to those characters, so they couldn't use them, at least not in like a major capacity. The script that was originally there was much more satirical and was almost like meant to be funny and entertaining, like a B-movie thing. Oopsie, it was rewritten completely by Terrence Dicks, who ultimately felt that it should be a little bit more serious, and then it was edited down to a smaller amount of episodes. They stopped them from ever using the Quarks ever again, and thus stopped them from ever being able to merchandise them, at least for an incredibly long time. Things got so heated that both writers tried to stop the serial from even airing, but, you know, here it is, oddly completely existing in modern times. Next up is The Mind Robber, written by Peter Ling, best known for co-creating soap operas Crossroads, Compact, and Champion House during the 60s, and directed by Peter Maloney, previously the production assistant which helped in The Rescue, Romans, Time Meddler, and The Ark, but only ever credited for The Mythmakers. He'll actually direct several stories, not just throughout this season, but throughout the early years of Doctor Who, so, you know, we'll keep mind of that name for a little bit. However, Derek Sherwin mostly helped write the first episode. After the Dominators was shortened up, they had to find a quick little thing to fill in an episode. Thus, suddenly out of nowhere to quickly depart, the Doctor uses the emergency unit, which shunts them out of space and time into this, like, nothingness room where they're attacked by robots. That is sure an episode. Great job. The TARDIS absolutely explodes and they find themselves in what they later find out is the land of fiction. I oddly don't like the idea of the land of fiction. The fact that anyone can just create things that already exist with their mind feels like just like a easy way to like have crossovers, maybe, right? That's the only real use I could see of it, because besides that, it's just like, what if the Doctor met fictional character? Like, okay, what about it? It has been used a multitude of times, and I don't think the story is bad for using it, but oddly, I don't find the idea all that interesting. After this story, I don't really ever want to see it. They find themselves stalked by big toy soldiers in a maze, where the Doctor's annoyed by some weird man who sounds like he's quoting off of a book of some capacity, and later on he's attacked by a bunch of kids that I think are like saying nursery rhymes or something. They're all separated. Zoe's off in this great-looking sparkly outfit, while Jamie is shot, but he isn't killed. He's like turned into cardboard. When the Doctor finds him, he finds him with his face off. Thus, he has to put his face back together, which ends up being the wrong face. This is due to the fact that, of course, the actor got chickenpox in the middle of filming, so he had to be replaced very quickly. It's only for one episode, though, so it's just weird. After finding Unicorn, he poofs back and then gets his regular face back like nothing ever happened, and soon enough they find the man again, and turns out he's Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels. He saves them from the Medusa, who has some pretty cool like stop motion snakes in her hair that I swear I tried to find like what production group like did that, because it's actually pretty good. Jamie's separated from him, and after being chased by some toy soldiers, he gets help into just Rapunzel's tower, who just is around, while Jamie and Zoe meet Carcass, a superhero who only Zoe really knows. Throughout all of that, they're told about the master of the land of fiction, and I'd imagine that the Doctor becomes a lot more interested in what's going on after hearing that. Ultimately, the master that we'll later know in the third Doctor's period, 2 seasons from now, is obviously not here, but I'd like to imagine he thought that all the way up to the point of them getting to Rapunzel's tower and meeting just a writer. It makes his like reaction in meeting the man of being like, who are you? I was just like, you're not who I thought you were gonna be. He's got this like mind robber machine with which he's gonna hook the Doctor to, and supposedly that's gonna like help him use his brain power, but like it's also a similar machine to what the writer's hooked up to, which allows him to affect reality. And it's like, why'd you put the super smart guy in the affect reality machine? Of course you're now gonna have a weird like mind battle using fictional characters. It's oddly kind of funny until ultimately Zoe and Jamie escape the little area that they were sending fictional characters at each other and just kind of unplug the machine. And it's one of several times that Zoe will end up being the smartest person of the trio as she goes, wait, why don't we just do this? After doing so, the machine kind of just implodes and everyone is sent back to where they were. Thankfully, the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe are sent back to the TARDIS, which presumably never exploded in the first place. This storyline was rushed into production. The first 4 episodes are only between 19 and 22 minutes in length, and episode 5 is the shortest episode ever in Doctor Who with only 18 minutes. This was because with such a small budget, they decided to cut down on the guest cast and mostly have the main cast. So Patrick Troughton was like, hey, that sucks, that's mostly on us. So ultimately they came to a bit of a deal of like, we'll make them short for you then. And you can really tell the cheapness of the sets in this storyline, and though I think that does add to the charm of the storyline, I don't think it's that great of a story. I think it's a fun one, it's certainly better than the Dominators, and I would recommend watching it because it is a funny, weird, wacky time, but, you know, it's not all that great. It mostly is one of those the Doctor and friends find a bunch of weird things, and it reminds me of the Celestial Toymaker of every episode is a weird new thing they gotta deal with, and eventually there's a weird mental battle that makes however much sense that you want it to. And because the episodes are so quick, it isn't a bad story to go to if you're trying to get into classic Doctor Who. Not only is it enjoyable and a good showing of both Jamie and Zoe, and also just how weird this show can get, especially during this period, but all of it does exist, and all of it is incredibly short, so why not? Personally, not my favorite story. It's one that I feel like you can skip if you want, but I'd recommend it. Not a must-watch, but I would recommend it. It can be a fun time, and it does introduce a weird concept that, depending on who you are, you'll either also not really like it, or you'll really like it, and you'll want to write a bunch of stories about it for whatever reason. This isn't the only appearance in Doctor Who fiction of the Land of Fiction, so okay. Next up is the invasion. The invasion of what? Of the Cybermen. Yeah, secretly this is a Cybermen storyline. They keep it pretty secret throughout all the way till episode 4, but they build it up pretty well. Written by Derek Sherwin, who at this point decided to just take up the role after Jerry Davis and David Whitaker weren't able to be written. It, of course, is the first one to have no involvement with Kit Pedler at all. Though directed by Douglas Camfield, who had been here since The Unearthly Child, it's majorly the first story edited by Terrence Dix, the first of his illustrious career of editing stories going forward. 2 episodes are missing in this story. A majority of them are still there and it is easily watchable, but 2 are gone, with them thankfully being animated in more recent times. It's one of the earlier ones, so it's not great, but they certainly do the job. Originally, there was no telesnaps there, so when they were on DVD the first time, there was just like a little introduction with like a little summary of what had happened. Majorly, you're with Vaughn, who essentially is this smarmy Bond villain who is like an evil Bill Gates, and by that I mean essentially Elon Musk. He owns this tech company and is very interested when the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe, who have arrived in modern times, are currently looking for Dr. Watkins. He's the father of this photographer who now kind of lives in the home of the Travers family. They can't be here due to the fact that, again, the writers won't legally let the BBC use them, so here we are. Isabel, a photographer, and her scientist dad, Dr. Watkins. Dr. Watkins is currently being kept under watch, making a strange death machine of which will do bad things. Vaughn wants to know why exactly they're looking for him and why they might have some kind of strange technology, which Jamie obviously lets slip because Jamie can't keep a goddamn thing to himself. But Vaughn's guys aren't the only people spying on the Doctor, and they ultimately take the Doctor and Jamie to their secret base, which ends up being Unit. Unit introduced by he himself, Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, the Brigadier. He's here. He's established Unit to find weird things like the Yeti and strange goings-on that the Doctor couldn't possibly handle because he is off somewhere gallivanting in space. The Doctor and Jamie are asked to go and spy on Vaughn, which they end up needing to do anyway because Zoe and Isabel went to go find them themselves. Though Zoe outsmarts a computer, which is a funny scene because Zoe is like beyond absolutely belief smart, they're ultimately brought to a whole other place, which Jamie and Zoe, after being caught and seeing them move a bunch of pods, then have to go via helicopter to go save the 2 of them. In the process, they find out what exactly is in those pods they're moving and what they're developing and why they're making a machine to help them, which of course is the Cybermen. Vaughn is constantly talking with the Cyber Planner to plan some kind of invasion of the Cybermen, of which, sure, they're developing ways to make these Cybermen better, to basically have the invasion go better, and in the process, one kind of like escapes. After the Doctor and friends tell them about these Cybermen, Unit doesn't exactly believe them, but, you know, the Brigadier goes, hey, we're gonna make it happen anyway. After not gaining permission from a man who essentially is, like, under control of Vaughn through vaguely hypnosis? That's unclear. He then decides we have to find proof for the Cybermen. Isabel goes, we could just take a picture, and then the Brigadier goes, oh yeah, we could just take a picture. With the help of our boy Benton, who will be a recurring character throughout the 3rd Doctor era, he first appears here, they're brought to the sewers where the Cybermen happen to escape. They literally don't know there's one in the sewers, but they go, let's go in the sewers, which, considering this story was written with less episodes in mind, this was clearly a subplot quickly put in there. They sure get that picture, but it's unimportant because Vaughn just lets out the Cybermen to be a 2-fold invasion, one on land and one as part of the big ship that is somewhere in space. Unit gets permission to use a bunch of missiles to try and shoot it down. In order to gain time, the Doctor actually goes to Vaughn and seemingly is able to distract him enough for the Cyber Planner to go, you know what, we don't need you. Which, yeah, no shit. It kind of gives shades of the, like, Dalek Master Plan of that villain and how much he was like, no, you have to work with me. I'm smart too, evil creature from space. You have to respect me. It's with his help and also Dr. Watkins, which he just kind of let go earlier when he finished the death machine. By the way, there's a great scene where after he finished the weird death machine that he goes, we never even had your daughter in captivity. What you gonna do about it? Shoot me? Do it, pussy. Vaughn's very funny. In the process, they figure out a way to take down the Cybermen, bring them into one group into a cool little action scene, and also just straight up shoot the spaceship with rockets. It's pretty cool, and also clearly where all the budget went to for a majority of this season. By the end, the Doctor and friends go, thanks, 'twas fun, and they ultimately leave. But this won't be the last time the Brigadier will ultimately see his friend. This will be the last time you'll see that face of him, though. We'll get to that way later. The Invasion is an incredibly fun story, and I would absolutely recommend it. It is a must-watch of classic Doctor Who. It is a great Cyberman storyline. It's a great storyline in general. It was clearly written with less episodes in mind, so it does meander a bit during that whole bit in the sewers, but a majority of this is a fun time. There's no time where I got bored or uninterested. Its villain is incredibly fun. He's not some big, powerful, evil guy, but he's just this smarmy, like, billionaire dude who's just fun to watch the entire time because he just gives zero shits the whole time and just tries to mess with the Doctor. There's better storylines, certainly, but I do see why people really enjoy this story and say that it is one of the best of the classic Doctor Who era. It certainly is high up there for me in my ranking of every story in general, especially in the Sixth Doctor, and with the Cybermans as a whole, it is a very entertaining story, and it barely actually uses them, right? They're barely in it. But the really cool build-up to it and the good usage of it really shows you that you only need certain things to really use the recurring villains throughout this franchise. And it's to use them properly, not just have them there and go, oh, there's the Cyberman. Though that certainly can be fun, a good use of them, I think, is the preferred way to do this sort of thing. This also is their new appearance. I really love how they look in this period of Doctor Who. Going forward for a good while, they're going to have this design, and I really enjoy it. This is my preferred classic Doctor Who design. Like, this is the one that I would point at and go, classic Doctor Who Cyberman. Not my favorite Cyberman design, but that's a discussion for another time. Plot is not perfect, pacing is obviously not amazing, but, you know, it's classic Doctor Who, so how many times can I go, there's too many episodes in this story, I wish they had shortened it before my fucking head explodes. We'll just wait and see. But regardless of the flaws that are indeed there, it is a genuinely really good story. It is a certified classic, and it is a must-watch for Doctor Who fans. If you're wanting to get into classic Doctor Who and you want to learn why the second Doctor is good, this is the one to watch. Next up is the Krotons. The Krotons, written by Robert Holmes in the first of his many scripts for this series, and directed by David Maloney, of course, from the Mind Robber. The TARDIS randomly finds itself on the planet of the Gons, which are a bunch of dudes that love standing in a room and going, the Krotons! The Krotons, who eventually reveal to be crystalline beings who look a lot like robots but are not robots. They're crystal dudes whose real forms are in fish tanks. Their ship, the Dinotrope, was crash-landed a long time ago and a civilization was built on top of them, which basically has them absorb people into their fish tanks till eventually they have enough gas energy or something, whatever's happening there, to eventually get off of the planet. It's been going for thousands of years, and it's like, you would have thought there was something different you could do to get your ship running, but okay. Gurgle in your fish tanks, weirdos. Let's not spend too much time on the Krotons, because all that really happens, the second Doctor and Zoe show up, Jamie sure is there, but majorly our two smart people, like, are captured, the Krotons go, we can use their brain energy to just get off of the planet, and they eventually outthink them by just getting poisoned and shoving them in their fish tanks, which eventually, like, evaporates them. The Gons the whole time slowly convince themselves, with barely really any help from our main companions, to eventually start some kind of revolution, which is never really important. I feel like people misinterpret the Doctor, and what he does with villains is that he will murk a motherfucker if he gets in his way. He just will do that. We'll see a lot of that in the third Doctor's era, by the way, but it certainly has been a thing, and is a thing right here. He just murks these dudes. And good, they're stupid. The Krotons are dumb. Another of several failed attempts to replace the Daleks, and it's like, God no, get these stupid things off my screen. They only look this stupid because though they were supposed to be crystal dudes, the actual costume designer was like, it'd be easier if they were square. Plus, they look more like robots, which is what I thought going into it the first time, and then totally had forgotten, and then thought again going back into it. I was like, that's right, they're not robots. The Krotons is not a good story. It goes by very quickly, so it's not like it's that much of a drag, but it's ultimately a nothing plot. It's just kind of dumb, and it's as B-movie schlock as the Dominators were. I think others are a little bit nicer to this story than I am, but I honestly prefer the Dominators. At least the Dominators had the quirks and was kind of funny to watch. The Krotons is a nothing plot. Nothing really happens throughout the Krotons, and it's not as bad as a later one in this season, but honestly, I could live without it. I would recommend you skip the Krotons as a story because you get nothing out of it. There's the occasional moment with Jamie and the Doctor and Zoe that is maybe, I'd say, worth getting through the storyline to see a little bit of them. Again, I love the three of them, mostly Zoe to be honest, but like, you know, come on. Yeah, the Krotons is dumb. Storyline is stupid. Second Doctor and Zoe outthinking some crystal guys, funny as hell. They're adorable. That being said, because we have a Chumbly of the season, why not a Kroton of the season? How about worst monster introduced in the season, named after one of my least favorite monsters? Let's memorialize them with this award. Let's just put those guys on screen of the past seasons of these first 6 seasons as each of them. The Krotons obviously getting the Kroton of the season for their season. But there's the singular thing the Krotons will ever have any impact on throughout Doctor Who, is I'm gonna keep mentioning their names going forward, like the characters do, with oddly the Krotons being the storyline with the most title drops ever. Like, they didn't even say the Daleks that much in the Daleks. Isn't that crazy? Man, you know who's cool? The Ice Warriors. Here they are in the Seeds of Death, the return of the Ice Warriors, written by Brian Hales, who helped make the Ice Warriors in the first place, as well as, oddly enough, Toymaker, and directed by Michael Ferguson from The War Machine. We're in the future of humans, a little bit like after the events of the Moonbase, oddly enough, with the weather control in the storyline is still a thing, but now it's on Earth and not the Moon. You know what is on the Moon? A base involving the T-Mat, this transportation system, which apparently is the main way to get around. Again, 2080s. When we gonna get it? It's apparently a new thing in the 2080s, but when I'm 83, 84, I better have teleporting around from place to place, goddammit. That's all I'm saying. My weird, like, brain in a jar robot body better be able to teleport. The T-Mat Control Center is run by Miss Gia Kelly. She's annoyed by her subordinates, mostly Fusham, who is in charge of the Moonbase part of it, who, of course, after the rest of his crew is murdered by a strange monster off-screen, as in the monsters off-screen, they get killed on-screen. He starts working with them, and oddly enough, the crew throughout believes that he's working with them on purpose, even though, you know, they're clearly holding him captive, but whatever. Towards the end of the episode, it of course is revealed to be the Ice Warriors, though obviously when you see the leader of the Ice Warriors, I believe is their commander, you're at first like, is that an Ice Warrior? And then you see the actual Ice Warriors and you're like, there they are. There's their Lego hands. But where's the Doctor and friends? They're in a museum. They just end up in a museum with this grouchy caretaker of a museum who really doesn't like transporting but loves space travel. It's weirdly that kind of allows the Doctor to connect with him, which is pretty cool. He worked with the person who was working with Gia Kelly, which is the reason why they asked him, and then also the Doctor and friends, to go to the moon via a spaceship. They end up getting stuck, and as they're trying to figure out a way to land on the moon, the T-Mat works again, so the group just goes to the moon T-Mat anyway. After being found by the Ice Warriors, the T-Mat then breaks down, which is oddly convenient. As the group lands, the Doctor is purposefully caught by the Ice Warriors to let his friends get away, and it's there that he begins to try and outsmart them. He's hit by one of the mentioned Seeds of Death, which is part of the real plan. Firstly, lead an invasion force, and then also mess up the Earth's atmosphere with the, quote, Seeds of Death, which are like evil fungi bombs, so they're not even really seeds, but whatever. Fusham, who this whole time has been shitting and pissing his pants because there's big Martian lizard monsters trying to kill him, finally stands the fuck up and allows the Doctor and friends to escape, essentially sacrificing himself to help weaken the Ice Warriors as they turn up the temperature because P.S. hot weather hurts the Ice Warriors. They use that to basically take the time to try to replicate the signal that is being sent to the mothership offwhere in space to have them get too close to the sun and die. There's a great little moment between the leader of the Ice Warriors who are like, you killed my whole platoon, and the Doctor goes, you were about to kill the whole planet? Again, the Doctor will murk a motherfucker. Oddly, the storyline ends with them stopping an Ice Warrior from taking control of the weather control thing, again on Earth this time. They, I guess, moved it, but it's still a thing in the timeline. I noted that while watching this, it oddly went from Jamie doing things and then Zoe doing things, who, again, was mostly pretty important, because she was just like, hey, idiot, do this with the signal. And they're like, what do you mean, woman? And she's like, do it. And then it worked. And they're like, oh, you're really smart, Zoe. What the fuck? How did you get so smart? And she's like, because I tried to learn things, idiot. I love Zoe. She's great. But the reason why Jimmy didn't do too much during the story is because Fraiser Hines was trying to actually leave at around this time. He announced he was going to leave the show, but at Patrick Troughton's request, he ultimately stayed on towards the end of the season, where all three of them were going to leave at around the same time. Some parts of it were rewritten due to this, which ultimately changed around some plot points involving Giacchilla being hypnotized, which I feel like makes the story much better had that not had happened, because that would have been weird. It's a fun story. I love the Ice Warriors. I love their goofy, dumb Lego hands. I love their weird flashlight beams, and I think they're very, very fun, even though most of the time they breathe and hiss and are just kind of like, don't question things. Just do it. Oddly, both the Krotons and the Dominators all did that, so it's sometimes a little bit annoying when like multiple Doctor Who villains are always like, just do what I say, shut up. Sometimes it really does feel like Doctor Who really is just like, spin the wheel and here's what dialogue you're gonna get. Oh, you've landed on, you're a stranger, you must be a traitor or a spy. Because this is the Ice Warriors and I love them, I would absolutely have this as a must-watch. It is a very entertaining story, and even though they bit with the T-Mat and it getting turned off and on, which is even pointed out in the story, the people who are like even higher than Giacchilla like go to their office and they're like, so it turned on and then turned back off and then it turned on and turned off again? What are you talking about? You're crazy. Broadly, despite all that, it is, I think, a very entertaining and well-paced storyline that I would absolutely recommend. It's an iconic monster and a pretty entertaining storyline. Not much is wrong with it. Not the best written storyline, certainly not, but it is fun, and I do love it. Next up is the Space Pirates. Let's spend even less time on the Space Pirates. The Space Pirates is notably one of these storylines that basically doesn't involve the Doctor. The Doctor and friends hang out with the supporting cast as the actual main character, who is like a space cowboy, essentially just tries to stop some people from dealing with some kind of like mining space company. Directed by Michael Hart, known for various other British shows, and written by Robert Holmes. It was made as this sort of science fiction western that wasn't just an illusion, it was meant to be like Gunsmoke and Bonanza. Parts of the story were double banked, as it is called, it was filmed at the same time as other parts of the next story, the War Games, which is another reason why the main characters of the show aren't in the frickin' show. The most notable part of it, though, really is episode 1 was the final episode filmed at Lime Grove Studios, the very difficult studio that had been a absolute annoyance to the production team throughout the series since An Unearthly Child. And though they preferred to film at the BBC Television Centre, it wasn't really like in the cards to always be there, but with this story onward, the Doctor Who would be there for good. Also weird, the only surviving episode of the Space Pirates was only still existing because it was the only episode of the storyline to be filmed in the 35mm black and white film. This story is boring, not much really happens in it, it's not very funny, and I don't care for it. Most people don't. I think it's not as bad as people like really put it out to be, but it is bad. If you want any episode to skip because you're like, I don't feel like watching every episode ever, just the like important and good ones, this is one that is an absolute skip. One episode exists and the rest is boring, and the only episode that does exist isn't all that good, so it's not even like, but maybe if it got its footage it'd be better. Like, no, I don't agree at all. I already said it before, and this is the last time I'll be able to really say it, is the missing footage doesn't really change my opinion of the story. As someone who can listen to like audio dramas and stuff, because Doctor Who exists as audio dramas in several cases, nah. The Space Pirates sucks. It could be a way better storyline, but it certainly isn't. Is it weird that this is the second time that a pirate-ish based storyline is the second to last storyline of a Doctor that not only barely exists and is also boring? Last note before moving on, this is the first storyline that John Nathan Turner was involved in. Though at this time it is a minor and uncredited role as floor assistant, this would be the first time that John Nathan Turner would be involved with Doctor Who, a name we will certainly learn later on. So we finally get to the second Doctor's last story. Now it's time for the War Games. The War Games is a very important story because it introduces a bunch of things and sort of does. This was recently re-released in full color, and I would recommend watching it in full color. I think they do a pretty good job, and they even add a couple weird little extra bits, which I'll get to later. That being said, it's pretty good on its own, so you can watch it in black and white. all episodes exist in it, so that's pretty cool. And there's 10 whole episodes. Did it need to be 10 episodes? Maybe not. Let's just say that for not the last time ever. Didn't need to be 10 whole episodes. It could have cut it a little bit of back and forth in the same place here and there, and they were clearly like, oh, we made that set, use it again in the later part of the story. But here we are. This will be a long plot summary to get through, because there's a lot to talk about, so let's just get into it. War Games! This is the longest Doctor Who storyline to survive the purging of the videotape archive, and is the earliest point in the series which first-time viewers can sit back and watch without there being a missing episode. Directed once again by David Maloney and written by Malcolm Hugh, who had written The Faceless Ones with massive help from Terrence Dix. We begin arriving in seemingly Earth during World War I, a place that if I had picked up a helmet in World War I and went, World War I, I would have fucking left, but okay. Things are seemingly fine because they make friends with Lieutenant Carstairs, weird name, and a doctor named Jennifer, but ultimately after a guy starts like hypnotizing people with his glasses or something, but through whatever hypnosis is used, a bunch of them forget all about the doctor and what exactly had happened when they met them, and they are put on trial. As far as all of them know, because of the hypnosis, they were given a fair trial, but indeed, it was some kangaroo court shit, and the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe are sent to be executed. The Doctor and Zoe are able to escape, and then have to go save Jamie from also being, like, shot in the knees. After making their way out, they convince Carstairs and Jennifer to help them escape, of which they eventually have to go back and get a map, and in the middle of trying to escape, finding out that there is multiple time zones on this planet, of which multiple wars, such as, like, the Roman time is also on this planet, throughout Earth history. After getting captured by World War I Germans, the Doctor uses the sonic screwdriver to amaze the Germans, of which the guy almost instantly forgets because of another guy with hypnosis glasses? They travel to various periods like the American Civil War and try to find a way back to their TARDIS, but also try to figure out what the hell's happening on this planet because I guess might as well. While they're doing that, the American and German generals with their hypnosis glasses meet up in the war room with the war chief. We'll get to him later, but I will mention I love his facial hair. They look and hunt for the group, and with that, they send some guards which end up kind of leaving their time travel machine there, which is very clearly Time Lord technology. The Doctor and Zoe go to the base of the War Chief and the War Generals and see their very futuristic area where a bunch of them who are known as the Warlords have been hypnotizing people to totally ignore all of the hints around them involving the different time frames and just keep fighting forever. In the process, the War Chief recognizes the Doctor as seemingly someone that he knew from his past, and the same goes for the Doctor. As the Doctor and Zoe run, Zoe and him are separated, and Zoe actually gets hypnotized for a little bit in this weird little head thing, which tries to get her to admit everything she knows. They don't really learn much from her, but okay. The Doctor saved Carstairs from being re-hypnotized and is able to get his help to try and get back. At around that time, Jamie just meets up with people in the American Civil War, part of the war planet, and ultimately they begin a sort of resistance. After some guards are sent to them, they use a time machine to get to the Warlord's base, which they end up getting captured. And of course, the little hypnotizer truth machine ends up working way better with Jamie, because Jamie tells them everything, because Jamie can never keep his mouth shut ever. After the Doctor uses his screwdriver once more to mess with some panels as they try to escape, this makes the other warlords believe that the war chief, who again did recognize the Doctor, might be with them. Spin the wheel, what do you get? Up, you're working with them, you're a spy! The Doctor does stay in the base as the Resistance goes back to the Civil War period, as they attempt to get other people to unhypnotize them and to bring them to the Resistance. The Doctor, Jamie, and Carstairs still in the base, attempt to figure out a way to use the time machine, but the war chief almost uses it against them to squish them to death, and he's like, you better give up, Doctor, or else. And the Doctor almost seems like he's about to, but then he uses a fucking smoke bomb, which is how long did he have that? The Warlord General shows up, and he eventually shuts down the whole thing of the constant bickering, essentially having the war chief promise that he will help them take down the Doctor, of which he does say, this Doctor will die, which I find a very notable line because, again, this is the Second Doctor's last story. They clearly knew by the end that there would be another regeneration, so they kind of knew by the end that that would be the truth. Their little mind rewiper machine is taken from them, and the Doctor decides to follow them back to the Warlord's base, as Jamie is now in charge of the Resistance, and he even, like, just convinces some people from the Mexican Civil War to join them that just happened to be around, and that's kind of cool. I thought, honestly, a great moment for Jamie, you know? He was just a soldier in the Highlanders before, and now, at this time, he's like a leader. People trust him, and that's a great moment for him, I feel. We get an awesome moment with the Doctor and the War Chief. A lot of people believe that the War Chief is the Master. And when you see the interactions and his reactions towards the Doctor, now while the War Chief doesn't need to be the Master, it really makes their interactions a lot more interesting. Yeah, he could just be another Time Lord and that's whatever, but having him be an earlier version of the Master, I think makes his lines in this pretty cool. It doesn't come off as the Doctor doesn't recognize him or just recognizes him as another Time Lord. He recognizes him. He knows him, as does the War Chief. They talk to each other as like, we are two of a kind. I know, you know what I know type thing. And it's great. And he kind of almost convinces the Doctor to join him. Not really. The Doctor is obviously trying to sort of use it against him. And both of them are also working together against the Warlords. But in doing so, they have to essentially make the Warlords believe that they are on their side. The Doctor makes his friends believe that he has betrayed them, and it's almost like that may have been the case until almost immediately after. He essentially gets them to pretend that they're being hypnotized so that he can use them in his plan to essentially try and sneak the fuck out. All this is done due to the fact that our two Time Lords have to try and make sure that a neutron bomb isn't just set off on all the war zones, because that would ruin the whole experiment. P.S. This war world is a big experiment to supposedly find the exact nature of why humans go to war, and I don't know if they learned anything, but okay. The War Chief's plan in trying to take down the Warlords is found out, and he's captured, and he's like, kill him and throw him in the pit. In the colorization version, they do have the sound of the regeneration noise, which to several people kind of brings that theory together that he is the Master. But in reality, though I like that theory, all that really happens here is that he's a Time Lord. Of course he's going to do that. I don't think him regenerating at the end of the colorized version of this confirms anything. Him being the Master is still just a theory, one that I subscribe to, but it's one that didn't become official because of that scene. He just regenerated because he's a Time Lord, and Time Lords would just do that. And besides, we don't even see it happen. So, you know, there's still lots of plausible deniability if you really don't care for that theory. I'll leave it up to the fans, but personally, I'd like to imagine he turns into another form, and then that form turns into the Master that will eventually meet 2 seasons from now. We'll eventually get there. But certain parts about the War Chief really just do scream Master to me, you know? Just the way he speaks does feel like the exact same character that we'll eventually get to know throughout Doctor Who. At the very least, I think we can agree that at least he could maybe be like the like Master's student, you know? You're like, that's who he is, that he learned what he like knew from the Master. And then we can leave it at that. That is vaguely Master involved, I guess. Either way, eventually they figure out that there's too much people stuck from their previous time periods, and the Doctor goes, welp, better contact the Time Lords. In doing so, the Time Lords essentially take everyone away, put them back in their time periods, and then put the Warlord Chief on trial. He immediately fails that trial by trying to use his soldiers to escape and kill people, of which he does shoot 2 Time Lords. I'll talk about that in a minute. While he's sent in like a bubble, all the Warlords are like stuck on War World forever. The Doctor is then put on trial. An iconic moment of the Doctor trying to plead his case of having a reason, and the Time Lords not disagreeing, but they go, you have to do it the way we want you to do it. Beforehand, the Second Doctor says goodbye to his companions and even sees what happens to them, as they've had their memories wiped. Their first adventure, the Highlanders and the Wheel of Space, they remember happening. And there's some kind of vague part of the back in their mind that kind of remembers their adventures, but now just as dreams. It's some of the saddest goodbyes because they're not gonna remember any of this. And why though? Other people like remembered all of this. God, it's so bittersweet.
I don't have a good place to really put this in the video, but I did want to note the 3 Time Lords that are part of this, like, triumvirate, and they don't really ever make it clear who these guys are. Later on, we see the Lord President is the guy in charge of Gallifrey, so the exact nature of the leadership of Gallifrey is left unclear. I would imagine these guys are, like, the head of the judicial branch, and they probably may have changed faces throughout the years, but one of these actors actually later appears as a different Time Lord named Goth, and personally I'd like to imagine that the first Time Lord, as he's called here, is Goth later on in The Deadly Assassin, where he would be their Lord Chancellor. And I imagine the third Time Lord, as he is called, is the same guy who the same actor later plays in The Three Doctors, who is also a Chancellor. I imagine the 2 of them became Chancellors in the second Time Lord, changes his face later on for whichever reason, and would gain 2 other members of the judicial branch, which would be the 2 guys that got shot by the warlords earlier on. The changing of face and all that is fine and all of that, but shared actors is something I like to pay more attention to. I should note that one of those guys later on would be in the 3 Doctors, and I'd imagine that's that same guy. I should also note that none of these guys are the other Time Lords that appear later on, like the one in Era of the Autons, and also one guy who is in Genesis of the Daleks. I'd imagine those 2 characters are the same guy. Listen, there's a lot of Time Lords around, and a bunch of them have incredibly vague answers when it comes to the various expanded media of Doctor Who, so you kind of just gotta make your own decisions on who each of these characters are and how they relate to each other, or the leadership of Gallifrey.
Ultimately, we say goodbye to the second Doctor as he just kind of like circles around in some kind of void, eventually turning into the third Doctor. But we don't get to see that on screen because during this time they didn't know who it was going to be. People do assume that the show was maybe going to be canceled and they weren't sure, and while there certainly was doubts, they had permission to keep going and the budget to keep going, and they were going to keep going. Before we say goodbye to everything, I will note the fact that it's time to say goodbye to certain companions and thus their actors. Zoe and Jamie ultimately don't have too much of their lives afterwards, especially oddly Jamie, both of which barely remembered anything about it until eventually finding themselves in the It's Definitely Canon Tales from the TARDIS, in the weird memory TARDIS, bringing back their memories, though years later. Zoe apparently became president 3 separate times, I don't know of what country, but okay. Maybe Australia, because she does meet a man in Australia who she has a son named James, subconsciously named after Jamie, which I really like, and I really like that. I like Tales of the TARDIS, make more of it. Jamie himself has a whole, slew of kids that he had with a wee bonny lass that he sat down with. Comes to the actors themselves, let's talk about Wendy Padbury. Wendy Padbury came to prominence as an actor in 1966 when she joined the cast of the long-running soap opera Crossroads. She played the role of Stephanie Stevie Harris, foster daughter to the show's main character Meg Mortimer, and a couple years later was cast as the second Doctor's new companion, as we know, Zoe Harriet. Becoming very close with her co-stars, tell many fond stories of the many misadventures and pranks that all of them had picked on each other. Her connection with Doctor Who after she left the program was not quite over, though, eventually appearing in Doctor Who and the Daleks in 7 Keys to Doomsday, a stage play based on the TV series where she played a companion named Jenny opposite Trevor Martin as the Doctor. Making various cameo appearances, she of course would stay away from the convention scene, believing she wouldn't have too much to say, but as she got older would be more and more in the convention scene. She loved being in Doctor Who, and also loved being an actor, though ultimately stopped acting over time. She would of course begin working as a theatrical agent for Nicholas Courtney, Colin Baker, Mark Dixon, and later on would be the very reason why Matt Smith would have a career. When it comes to Fraiser Hines at the age of 8, after studying acting at the Corona Academy, made his acting debut when he was 13 in Charlie Chaplin's A King, New York. By the age of 15, he appeared in 6 films, and in 1968 he appeared in the 8-part serial The Young Jacobites. He had various roles before Doctor Who, and even was the voice of Mission Control in James Bond's You Only Live Twice. That's weird. I didn't know that till right now. Appearing various times in the series later on, he would also be known for being a major character in the soap opera Emmerdale Farm, later just known as Emmerdale. Throughout the years, he would be in a multitude of TV shows and would have a great career in theater, and would certainly make a whole bunch of appearances in Doctor Who media, coming back to voice not only himself, but also the Second Doctor. He's still acting all the way till today, in 2015 in the adaptation of Outlander, which he had helped to inspire, among many other things. I think one of the funniest things is 2020, where he was in a romantic comedy film in the Scottish Highlands. He also, by the way, is an amateur jockey, which is also something I didn't learn until right now. Fraiser Hines, thankfully, is still with us and has even beaten bowel cancer, something that he actually kept away from the public eye, even not putting it in his own biography until he was given the all clear. A badass as a character, and also a man in real life. I think the characters of Zoe and Jamie are absolutely great. I love them. I love their weird, fun sibling duality of smart and himbo. They are incredibly fun to watch all the time because clearly the two actors had a lot of chemistry. I would have loved to have seen more of them as time went on, but it's clear that probably wouldn't have kept going even if the Second Doctor did keep going. I think their time with what it was great as it was, and maybe I would have it a different way, but I'm glad we had what we had. I'm glad both these actors are still with us, and I'm glad they still loved their time in Doctor Who. That's all you can really ask for. As we wind down Season 6, I'd like to talk about something strange. Season 6B. Now, in terms of talking about all of the other extra canon stuff involving the Second Doctor, a lot of it is more recent modern things involving other funny adventures in audio stuff, but also more importantly in the comics a long time ago, in between Season 6 and 7, because there was never a clear indication until the colorizing of the War Games from the Second Doctor to Third Doctor. People were like, who knows when it happened, and the idea of maybe being sent on Earth under special missions came about during the fact that the comics that were being written at the time didn't want to stop writing the comics, so they kind of went on the idea that that's what had happened. It wasn't quite clear, but as the Second Doctor would later make appearances, he would be mentioned to be under missions from the Time Lords that he had tried to hide from till the end of his period. So when did that happen? Thus the fan theory of Season 6B came, adventures of him going on afterwards before being fully regenerated. Essentially the idea is he was threatened with it, and the exact historical record is changed, and the actual events are different from what had been seen in the War Games. Though similar enough, at least with wacky adventures that eventually also involve Jamie, as seen in the two Doctors, which we'll certainly talk about way later. There are lots of questions people have in terms of some discontinuities that could be explained by other adventures that happened in between him being put on trial and him finally turning into Jon Pertwee. Hell, the colorization of the War Games still allows for the idea of Season 6B. Again, this is similar to the War Chief, it's a fun fan theory that there is basis on, and even modern day stuff still adds to that basis. But if you don't want to acknowledge its existence, you don't need to. It's not an official thing, but it could be. Eventually, though, the time would come. Whether it be through the Time Lords putting him back going, now is the time, or through scarecrows or something, he'd be put back into his TARDIS and would begin to transform. His face finally shifting to the one that the Time Lords had chosen for him, eventually being the Third Doctor, Jon Pertwee.
A general overview of Season 6 is, of course, I'd say around the same quality of the last 5 seasons, right? There are some really good stories mixed with some bad ones, and in the middle of it are mostly okay ones. And that's what you can say about Season 6 and, the black and white era of Doctor Who in general. It's fine. It's just fine. It evens out enough that it is a watchable show, and you enjoy it because you like Doctor Who wacky sci-fi stuff, moving past the bad stuff to get to the fun stories with the monsters and characters you actually kind of care about. Season 6 is, as always, a worthwhile season that I'd say is better than some of the previous stuff because it is actually watchable. But as with always, it is always up to you as the viewer on what you want to experience and how you want to experience it. Do you want to see it through animated or just through moving pictures? Then sure, I guess you can watch it, but really the more visual ones are the ones to go, and are normally the better ones, oddly enough. Those are the ones you can find on the BBC Player and on BritBox much easier than you can the other ones, and though it'll be much easier to watch the show going forward, all of Doctor Who Classic is worth at least attempting to look at. It's not my favorite season, though it is one of my favorite classic groups, but I did have a good time going through it. Before we end our video, I'd like to have a little run through of ranking all of the Second Doctor storylines now that we're at the end of his time. Just very quickly, let's put on all of the previous many stories throughout the past 6 seasons, all on screen. Going forward, starting with season 7, I'm going to be trying to give a letter grading as we talk about each story on their own, but note that each of them do have their own little letter grading, and in this major ranking that I have from the beginning storyline all the way to the most recent one with War Games. So just, here they all are in general, and here's a little bit of a descriptor on why for each of the Second Doctor episodes. Fury from the Deep. I really don't like the stupid seaweed monster. It bored the ever-loving shit out of me. Up below it is the Space Pirates. It's so boring and just absolutely pointless, and I could rather give less of a shit of it ever coming back into existence. Above it is the Faceless Ones. Got it, put me near to sleep. I really do not care about the Faceless Ones. Above it is the Dominators. It is a poorly written plot that is just kind of very funny. Above it is the Highlanders. If you can't already tell from my previous videos, I do not care for the historicals, regardless of how funny the Scottish man is within it. Above it is the Underwater Menace. There are certainly good parts to it, and it can be entertaining, but it still has fishmen, roly-poly fishmen. Above it is the Krotons. The Krotons are so stupid that this story is almost fun, but it's just kind of boring. Above it is the Macra Terror, big crab. Above it is the Moon Base. I love the Cybermen, but there certainly is better storylines with the Cybermen that do exist. They could have done much more with them with the very interesting setting that they kind of just forget exists. Above it is the Mind Robber. The idea of the Land of Fiction is not my favorite, but the story uses it pretty well. Above it is the Wheel in Space. I really like the Wheel in Space for the exact same reason I mentioned with the Moon Base, but again, they really could have used their setting a lot better than just kind of, we're in space, whoa! I do love the Cybermats, though. Now for our top 10 of the Second Doctor's era, we get Power of the Daleks. Power of the Daleks is pretty cool. It's a great little return, and it's the Second Doctor's really, first true showing of what he can do. Above it is the Ice Warriors, and I'll just note, above it, Seeds of Death. I really like the Ice Warriors, as dumb and whispery as they can be, but they're not as, they're a little bit, ineffectual, and they could really do better for, the genuine cool idea that they are of Mars lizard men. Above them is the Tomb of the Cybermen, one of the best Cybermen plot lines that exist, and one of the coolest little additions to their lore. I really like the way they explore it, and I like how it's like Indiana Jones, but with a sci-fi place. Above it is the Abominable Snowmen. I love these little snowmen, and I love just how they use the setting to their best advantage. And it's oddly, almost a historical, but, in the best way possible. Our top 5 begins with The Invasion. Probably one of the best Cybermen storylines that exist. It is a cool spy fiction plot line with this cool espionage feel to it, and this weird Bond villain, and also the Cybermen there. It's just very entertaining throughout. No notes on it, at least not many. Above it is the Web of Fear. The Web of Fear is the snowmen, but even better. It has the same plot as The Invasion, essentially, but of course more underground. I think it has some high stakes to it, and it is entertaining throughout its entire run. I love the characters that are introduced in it, and the characters that were reintroduced in it from previous storylines. I think it's a great showing of the Second Doctor and his companions. Kinda sucks that we never get the snowmen for a very long time. Above it is Evil of the Daleks, one of the best Dalek storylines that is out there, certainly, and a great showing of that the Daleks are this genuine force of nature that will always find their way back to the Doctor. If they had never made another Dalek storyline, this wouldn't be a bad way to go out. The way they show them really feels climactic, and it does feel final, until ultimately the Doctor does, fight them in the years oncoming. And when they do, it's also pretty cool. Above it is Enemy of the World. Everything cool about the crazy spy, espionage, world-traveling stuff from other Second Doctor storylines is absolutely here right now. It has this important political message, and it really has a lot of interesting parallels to not just then times, but modern day times. And if you ever thought that Doctor Who wasn't political from the start, then not only were you already wrong, but this storyline essentially shows you what exactly Doctor Who has always been about. And above it is War Games, the second Doctor's absolute best outing in the series. It is a fantastic storyline throughout. It is entertaining, it has so much great supporting cast, it's a good showing of not just the second Doctor, but both of his companions, probably one of the best TARDIS crew. The strange idea, though, it could have been a little bit shorter, and it would have been even better had it been a little bit shorter. It still uses its time and pacing very well as it goes on, and it continues to just ramp up what exactly is happening and the stakes and the intrigue as it goes on. And with the fantastic conclusion of finally introducing the Doctor's race is really the most important part. There's certainly more to it than just that, but that really does elevate it to something beyond that, to something genuinely iconic and one of the best. Though I feel like a lot of the storylines that I'm talking about throughout this, not just this season that we talk about in this video, but also throughout the second Doctor's time in general, will probably go a little bit down on the list when compared to the third and fourth Doctor's eras, maybe even some of the fifth. I do think a lot of this is still genuinely good and will be remembered for being just a lot of great, well-written sci-fi stuff, or at the very least, fun sci-fi stuff, which Doctor Who during this time was really good at doing. The second Doctor in general was a big change to the series. The second Doctor was a much different character than what the Doctor was with the first Doctor, with William Hartnell. Patrick Troughton played the character in a very different way, but in a way that wouldn't be too different than what people knew Doctor Who as. Whether it be the difference of an actor or the difference of the whole writing team and production team, the second Doctor's era was much different than the first Doctor's, though not enough to really alienate the crowd that had grown to love the series by this point. I do believe that the second Doctor was a great idea in order to continue the series, and it was honestly better for them to not fully explain it, at least for quite a while. You know, eventually we'll get a vague explanation, and then over time we'll get a better explanation on what exactly regeneration is. But ultimately, as it was, the changing of the actor and the continuing of the series was just done well enough as it could for this time. It was a refreshing idea, and it kept the series fresh, and it allowed it to continue to make new ideas and stories. The changing from Ben and Polly and the first Doctor to the second Doctor and who he'll eventually be with by the end is a great journey to go through. Though similarly, from when you look at, how everything is and what I just talked about, the second Doctor is probably as good as the first Doctor in terms of story quality. There's lots of good ones here, but there's more ones, you kind of just get through the ones that you're just like, oh, okay, all right, here's this next story, so you can get to the very entertaining ones. But regardless of how you look at it, the second Doctor's time is a really good one. There's some great stories here that I genuinely had a great time watching, both the first time years ago and rewatching for these reviews. The second Doctor is honestly up there with one of my favorite Doctors. Genuinely, I really love the performance, I love the character, and I love the companions that are alongside him. With the second Doctor gone, I think it's time we have a little goodbye to the actor Patrick Troughton, though he will have certain appearances later on, and this certainly won't be the last time we see him. This will be the last time he'll be, the main Doctor, so let's go through a little overview of who he was as a person.
Born the 25th of March in 1920 in Mill Hill, North London, England, to Alec George Troughton and Dorothy Evelyn Offord, who married in 1914 in Edmonton. Patrick has an elder brother, Alec Robert Troughton, and a younger sister, Mary Edith Troughton. He attended Mill Hill School and continued to live in Mill Hill for most of his life, his first acting role being in Mill Hill School's production of J.B. Presley's Bees on the Boat Deck. Troughton studied in the Embassy School of Acting at Swiss Cottage, where she was later awarded an acting scholarship in the Leighton Rallis Studios at John Drew Memorial Theater on Long Island, New York, in the United States. After the Second World War broke out, he abandoned his studies in the US and returned to Great Britain to enlist. He became part of the Navy, gaining a whole bunch of accolades and medals, and after demobilization, Troughton returned to the theater. He would be in various roles throughout the 40s. One of the more notable ones is Escape. One of the stars, of course, working alongside him, ended up being another Doctor. William Hartnell. In 53, he became the first actor to play Robin Hood on television. Isn't that crazy, by the way? After starring through various roles, he became the main guy chosen to replace William Hartnell as the Doctor. He tended to shun publicity and rarely gave interviews, like rarely if ever, but he certainly loved his time as the Doctor and loved working with the people that he worked with. After leaving Doctor Who, he continued acting throughout the 70s. One of the most notable roles he had later on is being impaled in The Omen. Personally, I'd like to imagine The Omen is actually the Doctor pretending to be a priest, and that's why he regenerated. That is a joke, but also if you want to use that as part of your theory, you can. Appearing in so many shows throughout the years, it became a little bit of a part of why eventually he passed away. His health was never completely robust due to heavy drinking and smoking. Though he had quit smoking in the 60s, the damage had already been done. He refused to accept his doctor's advice and developed a serious heart condition. Through overwork and stress in continued acting, he'd suffered 2 major heart attacks in his life, one in 79 and one in 84. Throughout his life, other complicated things would happen. Patrick Troughton had a second family that he hid from his main family, ultimately resulting in 6 kids, 3 from 2 separate wives. It is in fact the main reason why his first child, his first daughter, Joanna, does not talk to him. His 6 kids, Joanna, David, Michael, Jane, Peter, Mark, ultimately went on to have a whole bunch of kids of their own, resulting in Troughton having a lot of grandchildren. His 2 sons, David and Michael, became actors, and 2 of David's sons, Sam and William, also became actors themselves. All of them you might have seen in certain movies, and probably didn't know that they were related to the second Doctor. More importantly, you probably definitely know Joanna's son, who's Patrick Troughton's final television appearance would be in 1987. It will be released posthumously, as ultimately on March 27th, 1987, 2 days after his 67th birthday, Troughton, while as the guest of Magnum Opus Con #2, a science fiction convention in Columbus, Georgia, though being warned by his doctor that he shouldn't leave the United Kingdom and exert himself anymore, he really wanted to go to this convention to celebrate Doctor Who and have a big belated birthday celebration. Ultimately, he would suffer a 3rd and final heart attack at 7:25 a.m. on March 28th. Patrick Troughton leaves a complicated and interesting legacy. When ultimately you dig a little bit into his personal life, you learn that he was not a perfect man. I don't think Patrick Troughton was necessarily a bad person. I find it very important to bring up these sorts of things when it comes to actors that we all admire for reasons, for it's always good to bring out the fact that everyone has made major mistakes in their lives, which they'll ultimately have to deal with. And it's very important that we know who they are as people, to never really deify them or have them as perfect human beings, and that everyone can make mistakes. As we know, season 6, we gotta make it clear of what exactly happens next. As mentioned, the producer, who is the producer for a very short time, is really here as a transitional character. The Invasion and Web of Fear as stories were meant to be a sort of test run for a bit of a format switch, something that would involve a lot less time travel, but not no time travel, and be a little bit more of the Doctor working with UNIT to protect humanity on more or less modern-day Earth. There certainly will be time shenanigans, and we will eventually see the TARDIS. The TARDIS will not be in use for 2 whole seasons, 2 whole years without the really, main thing that people knew from Doctor Who. Although unit time frame and where the next 2 seasons quite take place, being unclear will be a discussion for later, point is, working with UNIT on modern-day-ish Earth is where the series was already planning to go, and this was sort of a test run to see if that would be popular. And thus our creative team decided to shift in terms of that as where the show was going to go, and in the next season with the new actor that they'll eventually figure out, as I mentioned, Jon Pertwee, to this new idea and figure it out kind of as they go along. I personally cannot wait, and though I will miss the second Doctor and how fun his adventures were, the third Doctor is really where I fully begin to enjoy Doctor Who. It's been a little bit, but we're finally here. We're finally on Earth with UNIT with Bessie. Next time we talk about Doctor Who, we will be talking about Season 7, the first third Doctor season. I, of course, was the Movie-a-thoner. I hope you enjoyed my little run-through of the 6th season and the end of the second Doctor's time period, and, whatever else you may have enjoyed about it, please leave in the comments. And if you want to have me cover anything else about Doctor Who or other shows, leave that as well. Make sure you subscribe to see that next video and anything else I create, and most importantly, stay good, stay safe, and don't be an asshole.